There we are.
Okay.
So I am here with Denise Stephenson, who is our Writing Center Director. And Denise is also a published author, and she used Kickstarter to fund her first book. And so I thought Denise would be a good person to talk to give you guys some perspective about a Kickstarter campaign. So first of all, can you tell me a little bit about your project?
So in the spring of 2012, I wrote a dystopian novel called Isolation, and decided that I had thought I would just publish it traditionally. But the more I sent out letters and the more I considered it, students kept saying to me, well, why don't you self-publish? And I sort of came to realize that the times had already shifted and self-publishing was maybe my best route to get it out there quickly. And so I chose to do a Kickstarter campaign because I wanted to pay a publishing house to still do a lot of the work, like the e-layout and print layout and a cover design. And so some of those things that even though I was self-publishing, I wanted somebody else to do the bulk of the work.
Okay. And so there was funding associated with that, and you didn't necessarily want to put that out yourself.
Right. I wanted to be able to have some of those things, especially distribution and marketing, because the choices at the time for distribution and marketing were sort of, you could go the Amazon route, or you could, get it into other hands, like all the various ways of both stores and online sources. So,
okay. So I think you basically covered this, but so then opting to use crowdfunding for you was primarily about crowdfunding being kind of a contemporary way to capitalize an endeavor.
Well, yes, but also the notion of self-publishing sounds like it's free. But if you're going to do those various things that I listed, especially having marketing and distribution done, then about the only way to do that is to pay someone. And so the cost of that was going to be nearly $6,000. So I decided that if I ran a Kickstarter campaign, that perhaps I could at least fund that beginning that way.
Right. Gotcha. So why did you choose Kickstarter as your crowdfunding platform?
At the time, it was almost the only one. I think there was one other choice out there, and it hadn't become popular yet. So Kickstarter seemed to be the choice.
Gotcha. And what did your outreach plan entail?
So I promoted it here at MiraCosta a lot and at my partner's university. I read from the novel at his university. I read at several parties that I had friends organize for me. I spoke to a couple of writers groups. I gave public readings at local libraries. And during the 30 days of the campaign, I read at least once a week in one of those venues. I also paid for some artwork so that I had that to use during the campaign, so that I had it for postcards and promo-sized kinds of things that I could hand out when I was in person reading.
Okay, and all of that's great, but then you also so you have to do those readings, but then you also have to get those people to go online and contribute.
Right.
So how did you do that?
Not very successfully. I had a successful campaign, right?
Yeah.
But one of my discoveries was that a lot of those people who don't actually know you don't contribute. So I had made these postcards that had the image that was used on the Kickstarter platform on one side, and on the other side it had a QRC link, and it had the web address to get there. And I think I was doing at the time a Selly. I don't know if you remember that platform. I don't know if it still exists, but it was a way to for people to just like dial a phone number and opt in to buy the book. So I had all of those things on the postcard to hand out, but I found that very few of those who actually contributed came from those sources other than MiraCosta and my friends and family a little bit.
Friends and family. And so what role did your social media accounts play?
At the time, I didn't have many, so I knew I had to start them all for this. One of the things I discovered very quickly, I was only on the major platforms. So I was on Facebook, I was on Twitter, I was on one other that I can't recall right now. I found that Facebook was only going to get to people you already knew other ways. Mm-hmm. And so it really, like I had a couple people who promoted out, but again, like I think I saw one funder from that. The more common thing was Twitter. Like if I'd have had the energy and if I had been more involved with Twitter, I might have been able to get Twitter to work for me, because it's a platform that really is trying to get out beyond your own friendship network. Hashtags are a way of connecting with like-minded communities. So connecting with novelists or readers, connecting with dystopia lovers, connecting with sci-fi lovers were all possibilities through Twitter. I don't think I recognized that soon enough to really utilize it during the crowdsourcing campaign, though.
Gotcha. And the crowdsourcing campaign for you is 30 days and all or nothing, because that's the way Kickstarter works.
Exactly.
Were you nervous at any point in that campaign, or did you know relatively soon, shortly before you started, that it would be successful?
I can't remember now when I knew it was successful, but it wasn't right away. It was probably maybe week 3. I watched how it jumped in like, when there were announcements at school, for example, I would see a jump. So several people would go on and contribute. A couple of times when I did those house parties with friends, I would see a jump from a few people contributing. I really worked email to my advantage as well, just reaching out to friends that way who were long distant. And I would see some jumps from that.
Right.
But otherwise, I think the campaign funded like week 3. And then I put up what they call, what do they call it? Like a stretch goal.
Yeah.
And so I put in a stretch goal. And then, to be honest with your students, I made sure I didn't reach the stretch goal. I think I could have. I pulled back because with the stretch goal, I had said something else I would do, which was to audio record the book, and realized that with technology the way it was right then, and my access, like it was going to be an awful lot of work on my part for the amount of money that I had listed. So I kind of pulled back. I did get more than I originally said. I set a goal of $5,775. I ended up funding at $6,985, and I think got all of that except maybe $10. But my stretch goal, I think, had been like 7,500. So I stopped short by, I don't know, 5 something.
Yeah. Okay. What was the most difficult part of the campaign?
I think for me, it was very exciting to watch the numbers climb the way I was describing a moment ago, like after those various pushes. But it was difficult. It was emotionally difficult to see who didn't support me.
Ooh.
So exactly, things you don't think about. So for example, in my case, my family was not very economically supportive. In lots of ways, they just didn't understand is sort of the bottom line. But at the time, it was more about like, oh my God, I have friends who are giving me hundreds of dollars, or who are giving me like $40, and you're giving me, 10 or 0. Like, really? So I think for me, the hardest part was that emotional part, because really without MiraCosta, and people I didn't even know at MiraCosta, right? So lots of people I knew well, and also people I didn't. The MiraCosta community is just very generous. So they pushed me over the line.
Yeah. Very cool. So what advice do you have for somebody who's considering crowdfunding?
I think there's sort of 2 pieces of advice. One is in the area of what are going to be the awards. So not so much partially what they are, but also what levels they're at. So I think you really want to think about the people who might support you and what levels they will support you at. And so I think the advice of Kickstarter at the time was to have several lower levels, but you sort of want a level that you hope a lot of people will achieve. In my case, that was a $40 level. And for $40, you got your name in the novel. And I think that was something that a lot of people, I think that was an attractive bump above just getting a copy of the novel signed, right?
Yeah.
And so people were willing to give that extra $15, I think it was, to have their name in the book. But I think thinking about your levels, I also had a couple of higher levels. Like I had a $100 level to meet with me and get feedback on a piece of writing you were working on. And it was one of the few places I got somebody I didn't know at all. I also had a few people contribute like at 150 or 250, where I promised to send people additional character pieces that I had written afterwards. And a couple of close friends from my distant past did that. But that was a chunk of money, right? To get $200 or $250 in a chunk. So I think thinking about your levels and how they stretch across and what you're giving for them. But also the other thing that I think is really important is to think about who will support you, right? Like what are the pockets of connections that you have? I've done some research since I did this, and most people without celebrity don't reach unknown parties who are willing to support them. The market now, so when I started, Kickstarter was one of the few crowdsourcing places. There's so many now that it's harder to actually get people invested in that.
Right.
My niece just did one on one of the platforms that teachers use, and was shocked because she had just moved to a new school district and basically she got nothing other than me, and yet all of the other teachers in her school said, oh, we get lots of money, but they're in the community, they've been there a long time. Right. So they got, they had those connections that she didn't have.
Gotcha. Okay. So, hang on. Let me do the jump and turn on my light. There we go. The little Maricosta thing.
You notice I tried to help from here.
Yes, I appreciate that. So would you do it again?
Maybe. I would do it again with the right project. I learned a lot. I enjoyed running the campaign itself. For this particular project, because marketing the book after, like when it was really done, should have been something that I spent a lot of time with. I had used up all my promotional energy and resources to run the Kickstarter campaign. So by the time I actually had the book in my hands a year later, I didn't have the energy to do that. I was really felt drained from that process. So with the right project, I would do it again, because it was a nice way to get money for a project I really cared about. And made me feel good that people were willing to contribute to that, which just added fuel, right, to the project. On the other hand, it's not without an expense of energy and emotion. And so I would only do it for the right project.
Gotcha. Okay. Anything else that you would want to share with my students?
I think if they go this route, to be prepared to put in the time, because it's, however long you make it. And there's the better piece of advice. I would not advise a 30-day campaign. You want to think about the benefit loss ratio, and really when you put out information to people is when they're going to donate. They really don't wait and think, well, this campaign ends on this day, I'll see where you're at. There's not as much of that as you might imagine. And so I think you want to run the length of campaign that you believe you can get the money, and or that you're willing to run and then get out if you don't get the money. Or if you're running a campaign where you're going to get a portion, you're going to get a portion of your original goal,
right?
How are you going to push toward that? Because I'm not sure that a month is realistic in our current world. I think probably a week or two, depending on what your plan is. And I think you need a plan.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask if in timeline you meant to go shorter, because it's like when we look at surveys and when you send out like a marketing research survey, we know that 70% of your response rate comes in like the first 2 days. Yep. So yeah.
Okay. We don't hold on to things anymore, right? We do them or we don't do them. And so I would say a shorter campaign where you just gear up to do it and do it fast and put everything you've got into it is both personally a better idea, as well as like in the long run for the campaign itself, a better idea.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you.
You bet.
All right. I will talk to you later. Bye.
Okay. Bye.